Hi students, in this video we will discuss about the coursework assignment 2, which is a lab report. So many students have a lot of confusion how to write this comprehensive lab report, whether 6 experiments as a single report means it creates a lot of confusion generally. So I will try my level best to make it very clear how to write a lab report and all. So the comprehensive lab report submission is on May 5th, like 5th May 2018. The main purpose of this lab report objective is student must be able to identify and analyze the properties of building material, and student must be able to discuss experimental setup, procedure and results. This is the very important one: experimental setup, procedure and results. That's why it is related to your lab report too. So the task is that students are required to submit one comprehensive lab report through Turnitin, and lab report will be assessed for 100 marks. Finally, these marks will be scaled as whatever the lab report you have submitted, including all the 6 experiments. 100 marks will be scaled to 25 marks, and the 25 marks, as you know, it's case study. Total 50 marks for your internal exam, internal marks. So I discussed these points in the previous video case study, or if you don't watch the video, these are the report formats which we explained in the case study report. These are common for everything. In this report, I would like to concentrate more on the report sections: cover page, table of contents, introduction, methodology, results and discussions, and conclusions and references. You need to uh, provide a cover page, which you can see the template uploaded on the Moodle. So table of contents. Next, after cover page, immediately should have table of contents, list of figures, list of tables. These three are very important. This is the example format: cover page, table of content, list of figures, list of tables, introduction, methodology, results and discussions, conclusion and references. Dear students, this is not individual reports for each experiment and combining. It's not like that. It's a only single report. In the single report, this is the important part. So let us start discussing about the report sections required. The first one is introduction. In this introduction, you are required to write the background of the report content, and you need to summarize the overview of the report and how the report is organized. So you can write in such a way that what is this report, what you are discussing in this report, what are the experiments you have conducted, and what are the properties you determine, because already experiments have been done. So what are the properties you determine? Everything you can explain in this introduction. The first paragraph is the general introduction or the background of the report to the topic about the properties of materials. So you must be able to write general introduction to the topic and about the properties of material, as I mentioned here. The second paragraph is about how you determine the properties, like how you determine the properties of the material by conducting various experiments, right? So or how you determine the workability of the concrete. Determine the properties. From the first 4 experiments, you have determined different properties. For example, from the first, you determine the property of silt content, percentage of clay and silt in the sand or the given sample. The second experiment, you determine the bulk density and void ratios. In the third experiment, you have determined the particle size distribution. Fourth experiment, you have determined the flakiness index and the elongation index. In the fifth experiment, you have determined the workability of concrete in relation to slump cone and water cement ratio. In the sixth experiment, you determined compaction factor with the help of compaction factor equipment and determined the workability of concrete. So these are the properties you have determined from the experiment. So this is the information which we are expecting from you to write in the introduction. So there is no separate introduction. There is experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3. It's not separate. You can discuss it in all together, because the first 3 experiments deals with fine aggregate, fourth experiment deals with coarse aggregate, Fifth and sixth experiment deals with concrete and its workability characteristics. Now coming to methodology, the most important part of the lab report, what you need to do here is, in methodology, this you can divide it. For example, the section 2, methodology is section 2, right? So now 2.1, experiment 1, provide all the information like observations, calculations, tabular forms, graphs, result, everything as I mentioned here. Explain the experimental setups and procedure. Individual experiments like 2.1, complete everything at a time. 2.1, experiment 1, procedure, experimental setups, apparatus, observations, calculations, results, tabular forms, graphs, everything. Then 2.2, experiment 2, 2.3, experiment 3, 2.4, experiment 4, 2.5, experiment 5, 2.6, experiment 6. So this is the way which you can follow for the methodology. The following are the details. The heading should be informative, discuss the conceptual framework, subtopics. As 2 is the main topic, 2.1, experiment 1, 2.1.1, 2.1.2. These are all of subtopics, okay? Now coming to discussions, results and discussions. So as we generally discussed in the lab, while you conducting the experiment, we used to ask you every time discussion. You need to discuss the results. So how can you discuss the results? Commenting on the results obtained. How are the results? Interpreting what the result means. So from the value of the result, you need to discuss what that result shows, or what the result determine from the value. Explaining any results which are unexpected. If there is any result, for example, if you have done the silt content, the silt content is more, so you can write down some reasons. What are the reasons in general, why the results are very high, why the results are very low? So you can discuss these aspects in the results and discussions. Now coming to conclusions. So in this conclusion, as we all know, you can just compare your result with the British standard. This can be like 6 paragraphs, small 6 paragraphs. 6 paragraphs, each paragraph can be compared with the standard, and you can recommend whether the material can be used for the construction purpose, or it is rejected, or it is not acceptable, why it is not acceptable, all these things you can discuss in the conclusion. All 6 experiments, because every experiment has their own specific standard. So results, for example, if you take bulk density, which one is more, which one is less, why it is more, why it is less, all this you can discuss in here. If you're comparing with a standard and you are deciding or recommending the material to be used, whether the material should not be used, you mention them in the conclusions. Now coming to references, as we discussed before, whatever the information you have gathered from various sources, you need to refer them using CU Harvard style referencing. Kindly check CU Harvard style referencing uploaded on the Moodle and sent through a mail. The same thing should not be outsourced, and all are same as the case study, because I explained it in detail in the case study. I am not going to waste time again. The plagiarism policy, the late submission policy and all. This is the main important. You can see the report quality is 10 marks, introduction 10 marks, methodology 30 marks. There are some changes, please note it down. This is not according to the previous one which I have given to you. I have made some changes. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100. As I explained you in the previous video about the rubrics, so the report format, the introduction, for example, if you want to get an introduction outstanding marks, your discussion should be outstanding on the materials and their properties. Very clearly mentioned the objectives of the assessment, and the structure of the report is very well stated. So the next category is excellent, the next is very good. If you provide minimal discussion, your report will be accepted as a satisfactory category. If there is no discussion, you will get less than 50 marks, which considers as a fail. Like if the less than 50% is very weak or poor performance. So all sections are mentioned clearly. Methodology, if you can read this, you must be able to understand what are the minimum requirements of a particular section. Discussions, methodology, introduction, conclusion, references. Overall feedback of the student is also given at the end. There is no marks, but it is just to give a feedback to the student. So you can see this is the assessment evaluation criteria. How we are going to mark is this with the grid provided here. You can see if the report quality according to the rubrics, if it falls under satisfactory category, you will get marks according to the percentage provided here. So for report quality 10 marks, introduction 10 marks, methodology 30 marks, results and discussion 20 marks, conclusions 20 marks, references 10 marks. Out of total 100 marks will be given for this. Is there any penalty? We will deduct this. Final marks will be given for the coursework too here. I hope this video also gives you an idea about how to write the lab report. If you still have any queries, please contact before you start the lab report, because the submission is going to be on 5th May. Almost 1 month time you have. These sections are explained in clear. If you still have doubts, please contact and get it clarified. I hope this will be helpful for you. Thank you and all the best.